Quad group, made up of the U.S., Japan, India, and Australia, has issued a joint statement after virtual leaders meeting on Friday. CGTN's Greg Navarro has the details from Sydney.
The first ever virtual meeting of the Quad took place in the early morning hours here at Australian time, lasted about 90 minutes, and it was the first time that it involved top-level leaders from the four nations, Australia, the U.S., Japan, and India. Now, the Quad afterwards released a joint statement, which is in short a pledge of cooperation on three main topics: COVID, climate, and security. Now, the group will form a COVID partnership that will, in essence, try to speed up the end of the pandemic by increasing funding and increasing vaccine distribution across Indo-Pacific countries. The Quad has also formed a working group to tackle climate issues. That includes the Paris Climate Accord and emerging technology. And on the issue of security, the Quad released a statement shortly thereafter saying, quote, "We strive for a region that is free, open, inclusive, healthy, anchored by democratic values and unconstrained by coercion." Now, it's believed that although China was not mentioned in any part of the statement released afterwards, it is believed the Quad is meeting in part to counter the efforts by China or growing influence, according to some observers there. Now, the Quad has agreed to meet once more later on this year. And this time, though, they plan to do so in person. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
And this is the first time the leaders of the four Quad member states have held talks since the group was formed over a decade ago. CGTN's Timothy Woolrick gives us a brief review of the development of the group.
The U.S., Australia, Japan, and India came together in 2004 in the wake of the Boxing Day tsunami that caused widespread devastation. The ad hoc mechanism soon became the foundation for the Quad, first proposed by Shinzo Abe in 2006 before he was voted in as Japanese Prime Minister. The first round of talks between officials from the four countries began the year after, leading to the first military exercises between members. But regional powers didn't roll out the welcome mat. China launched a protest with Quad members before the first meeting. Both advocates and critics of the group see its main goal as countering China. And friction with the country was one of the contributing factors that led to the demise of the first iteration of the Quad in 2008. It was revived on the sidelines of the 2017 ASEAN summits in the Philippines. The Quad denies its purpose is to counter China.
For us, this is where we live. This is where Japan lives. This is where India lives, and of course where the United States across the Pacific has had a long-term presence. And so this is about an anchor for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, and that benefits all nations of the Indo-Pacific.
Officials from the Quad say topping the agenda of this meeting is the coronavirus, regional security, and climate change. But China is likely to be a major topic as well, even if the four countries don't say that publicly. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
I want to get you more views and perspectives on that meeting. I'm now joined in the studio by Teng Jianqun, Director of the American Studies Department at the China Institute of International Studies. And via Skype, I have Surab Gupta in Bethesda, Maryland. He's a Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute of China-America Studies. Gentlemen, fantastic to have you on Global Watch today. Mr. Teng, I want to start with you. This is the first meeting between leaders of the Quad, and an upgraded meeting if you count the level of leadership participating. What do you make of the timing here?
Yeah, this is a very strange arrangement by the four countries. Why these four countries just established such a alliance or bloc at this moment? We are facing new challenges like pandemic, climate change, non-proliferation. So we should think about the joint or comprehensive cooperation among all the parties concerned in this region, not to establish a bloc like the Cold War time. Some countries just established a bloc to confront another bloc in Europe, in Asia. So this is a Cold War mentality at this moment. I think even the leaders this time did not touch upon the issue in China, but I think some experts or some officials in these governments just mentioned before the webinar the conference this time, just to say this is actually a result of the unification of all value-oriented countries to be unified to confront the fast development of China. So I think this is a code thinking by some countries in this region.
Mr. Gupta, I want to get your take as well, because the four countries came together in 2004 in the wake of the Indian Ocean tsunami that caused widespread devastation, but the group fizzled out after that. If you look at the topics under discussion this time, a lot of them, COVID, climate change, these are global issues instead of regional ones. But what we're seeing, like Mr. Teng mentioned, seems to be a regional alliance. What do you think is the reason for upgrading relations now for Quad?
You know, the point you made was a really good one. These are global issues, not necessarily just regional issues. I will add one more important point to that. These are non-conventional security issues. Now, the problem for these Quad guys has been that their suspicion and focus is wholly on China, not on COVID, not on these other things. It is focused on China. But what they've been doing is just naval exercise after naval exercise after naval exercise. Well, there's only so many beaches you can keep storming in your naval exercises. You need a functional purpose to get that group have some momentum and meaning. The 2004 tsunami had given that meaning, and they've been unable to create that meaning thereafter. And now we have COVID, and we have this terrible pandemic, and so that has created a purpose, a functional purpose, which was lacking, with which they can say that they are united for that purpose, but the real purpose actually of getting united is frankly to gang up on China.
Mr. Teng, on the topic of security, how will the Quad mechanism as it is today impact security in the region in the long term?
Yeah, I think the security situation in Asia-Pacific region has been so far so good. Of course, there are some confrontations or conflicts in some areas in South China Sea, across Taiwan Strait and in Eastern China Sea. But I don't think this is a very serious challenge for the security for all the countries in this region. But some countries would like to use the old mentality to establish some bloc to challenge some other countries' development. This is a big issue. We have witnessed the ups and downs of the relationship between China and the United States in recent 4 years, especially during Trump administration. The countries in Asia-Pacific region also were worried about the relationship, because this is not a relationship between China and the United States only. This is actually an issue for all the countries in this region, because such a globalization of world economy and such a multipolarization of world politics, we do have new mentality or thinking to cooperate, not to establish some military bloc or security bloc, even in dealing with challenge traditional threat from this region.
Mr. Gupta, speaking on specific fields of cooperation, the group said it will form a vaccine partnership to help Indo-Pacific countries with COVID-19 vaccination. What will that type of plan entail, and how do you view cooperation in vaccine production and distribution in the region?
Well, I think they are the four members of the Quad are in a position to actually follow through on their plans on with regard to vaccines. And the reason for that is, in the United States, they have this great innovative power which has actually produced quality vaccine, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. In Japan, they have a power which has deep pockets, and so it can finance the rollout of the vaccine. In India, they have a kind of a mini superpower in terms of vaccine production. They've done so much on the generics front, so we have a production power out there. And of course, the Australians can help in terms of logistics, maybe in Southeast Asia or in the South Pacific. So they are well suited to implement their vaccine purposes, their goals. But I would again come back to the point, I mean, non-conventional security threats and things like pandemics impact everybody. And these should be done under a multilateral umbrella. And what a great boost it would have been for the WHO if the WHO were provided the apex authority in sort of rolling out this sort of vaccine plans. People in Asia and beyond would once again look up to the WTO as being that great multilateral organization which does these things, and it would once again reinforce an emphasis and a desire for greater multilateral cooperation. We will miss out on that, but to your specific question, yes, those 4 countries are in a good position to actually roll out their vaccine plans.
Understood. Mr. Teng, one more question for you. Let's talk about that highly anticipated meeting between China and the U.S. Top diplomats from both sides will hold a high-level strategic dialogue in Alaska next week, the first of its kind since Joe Biden took office. Do you think the Quad meeting in any way could influence what comes up in conversations in the Alaska meeting between China and the U.S.?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I think there are some connections between the 2 conferences. First, I should say the conference or the dialogue in Alaska gave us a very strong signal that China and the United States would like to return to rational track to have some engagement or dialogue so we can avoid some misunderstanding. Second, I think this is a very important dialogue for the region because, as we discussed just now, almost all the countries are worrying about the relationship between China. Of course, the competition between the 2 sides has been there and will be there for long decades. And I think on the other side, Biden's administration would like to have some cooperation, including the fighting against the pandemic, climate change, and regional non-proliferation, including Iranian nuclear issue, nuclear issue in Korean Peninsula. So this is a 2-layer policy by Biden administration toward China. And in terms of China's position, I'm sure China would like to cooperate with the United States in various aspects, for example, in trade, in security, and in international affairs. So this is a very important dialogue. I don't think any influence from court can change the way or the direction of the cooperation or the dialogue for the 2 countries, I mean China and the United States.
Saurabh Gupta, Teng Jianqun, your analysis is much appreciated here. Many thanks for your participation.